Welcome to No Question About That. This is what is it? It's the Monday pod, if that's the thing. Yeah, whatever.
The Monday Mailbag.
Monday Mailbag. Yeah, good. Very good.
Yeah.
All right, I'm Ed. In your ears there was Adam. How's it going, Adam?
Good. It's nice to have a weekend where football didn't ruin it. All that matters is we got the late goal, game's over, don't need to talk about it anymore, moving on.
No.
8-day break before the next game. Let's just enjoy, and it'll be a shitstorm and still down. It feels like the fan base is in civil war. Let's just enjoy the fact we won the game and keep moving.
Yeah, well, I asked for questions on Twitter and Blue Sky. No questions about the Leicester game whatsoever, which is very good. Don't need to relistigate that. And actually none about the Tottenham game coming up either. Although your mate Ange may or may not be in a job by then. We'll see. As far as
I don't want the new manager bounce. I don't feel like they're going to sack him. I feel like Levy's too spend conscious. He'll wait as long as he can. So just keep waiting, although we don't have a good record against him this season anymore.
No. All right. So I've split this into sort of team manager tactics, finances, youth, nostalgia, and other silliness. And we'll see how many of these we can get through. Mark Ferguson, friend of the show, says, hypothetically speaking, because I'm not advocating for this, but what if United were to replace Amorim? Who would the next coach be? Do you think it would be someone who also plays 3-4-3? Thoughts?
I don't think the formation matters because you haven't changed the squad to suit the coach yet anyway. I sort of feel like as well with the recruitment that they're going to undertake, they're going to be requiring like different profiles of players. So these players are going to be more flexible and young and coachable. I feel like the system doesn't matter so much. It's more the capability level and coachability level. Who that coach would be, I don't know. Probably more likely to be a forward at the back coach just by the volume of coaches out there who coach that way, right?
Yeah.
But for me, so that doesn't matter so much. It sort of never has. They're going to have to turn over the squad no matter what. It's about bringing in a better quality of players who can play multiple roles, things like that. What about you?
Yeah, no, look, I think that's perfectly fair analysis. This idea that we were going to have a club style seems to have been binned, I assume, because I don't think they're saying, hey, a 3-4-3 system, high possession. I mean, maybe they're saying that. I don't know. But 3-4-3 is not going to be a club style. They're not implementing it necessarily at age group levels. We're not seeing Nice do this or Lausanne if we're thinking about the multi-club model in the way that Chelsea did. So I don't think that's in the thinking. I think with this one, it was expedient. They picked a young coach they thought was impressive, had an impressive record, and he just happened to play 3-4-3. So that's what they've done. As for transfers, I mean, you're right. I think they'll buy multifunctional players. I mean, the concerns are buying central defenders who can play in those wide areas. That's fairly unique profile, but it'd have to also be players who could play in a 2. And the wing backs now in Patrick Dorgu, they've got someone who's pretty multifunctional. I don't think he'd have a problem playing at left back. Or if you believe Ruben Amorim, has no problem playing at right back, right wing back, or right wing as well. We'll see about that one. There's only a few. I mean, if you went out and got Denzel Dumfries or something like that, like he's not playing in the back 4. So there may be some red flags there. All right. Hannes Abrahamson says, where do you realistically think we will end our season? Somewhere below 10th, I imagine.
You're going first this time, surely. You can go.
Yeah, I think somewhere below 10th. So I imagine it will start getting better in the spring, but I could be completely wrong about that. And I'm just thinking like the more training sessions, the more time. But I mean, it's not like that's been true so far, right? 7, how many? He's had 5 league defeats and 7 overall. Actually, I completely forgotten how many it is. Maybe it's 7 league defeats. It's a lot.
I feel like I've stopped worrying about the league position so much. I know it sounds awful and that sort of, would get attacked with where your standards have dropped this far. But this season has sort of been a wash for a while. We're focusing on the cup runs. We've got the FA Cup and the Europa League. Despite everything that's happened, we do have a genuine chance at winning both, particularly with the exits in the FA Cup on the weekend. There's only City and Newcastle of note left in the FA Cup. So it really comes down to who you draw now as to how far you might go. Do you want something favourable? as far as the league goes, I think it's pretty much guaranteed we're in the bottom 10. It's crazy to think I think 5 points now off of the top half. It's not top 4 anymore, it's top half. And that doesn't matter to me. I know it's easy to point to what Ruben Amorim said at the start and that we will suffer and that there will be pain. Maybe we underestimated how much. Maybe we underestimated how truly disjointed this squad is now. Maybe how mentally fragile and broken they are as well. But yeah, throw it out. Throw out the league. It doesn't matter that they're not getting relegated, but they're not going anywhere this season either.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Although 16th or 17th would be pretty brutal. Could end up in 16th if we lose
about
to
top
Tottenham
half of the bottom half?
Top half of the bottom half. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, it is £3 million a place. So it actually matters, right? And that's cash in this year. So it's quite a player. If you say the difference between 16th and going on a great run and finishing 8th is going to be £24 million, right?
And we know how tight it is too. Like you said, if you get on that run in spring, then all of a sudden 13th can become 8th pretty fast. And it's not very good, I know, but it's more the bigger picture. Like you said, that's 15 million in a kitty. So yeah, hope that we climb. Not so optimistic that we will.
We'll see. All right. Zach says, successful managers show flexibility and adapt their tactics over time to suit the players, to challenge the opposition and keep up with the times. Saf used 4-4-2, 4-5-1, 4-1-1, 4-3-3. He never actually used a 3 at the back ever, I don't think. I mean, maybe I remember once at Anfield he did it, and it was more like a 5. It's fine that Amorim should be inflexible now to impress his style on the team, but when will he be open to adapting in the future? Yeah, I mean, I think it is a bit of a concern. I mean, he's already adapted, hasn't he? Because he started playing with Ahmad at right wing back in this much more attacking, and then quite quickly reverted to playing 2 fullbacks in those positions. They're fairly dogmatic about that, and it feels like that's less 3-4-3 than it is 5-2-2-1.
It's funny. There's another great question I think you've included on this about system and things. So I don't want to tread too much on that. But for me, the inflexibility is definitely that fullback aspect, turning a 3 at the back to 5 at the back. That's probably the bigger thing for me. I think we've seen quite a lot of in possession and out of possession flexibility so far. The formations they play, they've lined up in a 4-4-2 without the ball. We've seen a lot of change in that aspect. I think right now, as the question stated, it's okay to be inflexible with formation when you're trying to drill down. Not a lot of time to do it. I think we have to give a bit of credit to betting in ideas and the base system itself, particularly without the players with the requisite flexibility and skills to really pull it off. But I think time will tell on that one.
Yeah. I think, as Amorim keeps saying, it's not about the formation, it's about the principles. So he's trying to drill into them certain kinds of principles in each phase of play, in possession, out of possession, whether you're playing through the defensive third or in attacking areas. And the 3-4-3 is not so much of a problem. Who plays in those roles I find a little bit challenging and a bit confusing. I mean, Patrick Dorgu on Friday night, right wing back, like cutting back onto his left foot to play it backwards all the time, was not an awesome look.
Well, I remember in the first half when he had the ball down the wing from the ball from Delo, and he controlled it. That was going out. He still controlled it with his left. But the problem is when he came back into play, he had to cut back, but then he didn't. He used his right foot. It still showed the limitations of that inversion.
Yeah.
So I'm just let's hold fire a little bit. But yes, please play the player that we need to play in the left wing back role that we need to fill.
And I don't mean this as like old man shouting at clouds. It's got to be, left foot plays on the left or whatever. I mean, when you are playing, your 4 wide players are all inverted. It naturally goes into very, very central areas, right? And Leicester played box midfield, which crowded that in there as well. Anyway. All right, on a similar vein, Lucas, friend of the show, says, according to The Athletic, United made at least 1 tactical tweaks in terms of formation within games. Forest tops the list, while Southampton is third. Does this even indicate anything? I mean, I think it's to that point, really. he will change things. I mean, we saw it was kind of radically different after Garnacho came on Friday night at half time, wasn't it? So, and he has changed between 3 and 5 and 2 and Bruno dropping back and stuff like that. I do start to worry when it feels a bit sort of Pep lobotomy stage where he's like there are 4 players in weird positions. You know, Bruno's deep, Kobbie Mainoo's up front, we've got a left back at right wing, blah, 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 so on and so on and so on. So, yeah.
Well, for me, is it a bit of regression by overcomplication? It's exactly what you said about that Pep big game thing where he would overthink maybe, and maybe it's too active a mind and maybe we're too simple a mind to understand it. But yeah, sometimes it's like when things going really bad, sometimes it's just keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
The KISS principle. But yeah, sometimes for me, that was the question I was asking myself at Leicester: is are we making things too difficult? Like when a manager first takes over, sometimes it's just going back to really simple stuff. I mean, we can't do what Nottingham Forest do. I think they were top of that table with 19 changes. They're a really pragmatic sort of team. It's a very different way that they choose to play to what Amorim's trying to do. And there is this obsession over formation. So every time things go bad, it's like he's got to scrap the 3 at the back. It's not the 3 at back that matters. It's the principles he's trying to instill. We saw it Sporting. In Portugal, they were able to play a very attacking system. But in Europe, they were more pragmatic.
Yeah.
Look what happened against City. We can point to the 4-1 scoreline. But what came from that is playing quite deep, and then the athletes would surge forward. That's how they slaughtered City, because City didn't have the athletes to match them through midfield in particular. So I think sometimes we don't quite understand the problem. I think we're not always talking about the right problem. That's how I've seen it.
Yeah, well, some of the evidence in the data, Kay Hayes says, is there any data for things that were improved under Amorim? Are we more solid defensively or have more possession? They play patterns that have been boring, but is there some kind of base to build on? Honestly, I could find it if I went and really dug into everything, but I didn't have time to do that. There were a lot of articles about this kind of thing after about 10 games, in which it was clear that the best one was that we were about on par with XG, whereas Ten Hag's side was miles below it, like 8 goals below it or something like that. More deep build-ups, fewer chances given up. I don't think there were any more chances created. I think so there's some evidence. More deep build-ups. I think that's or build-up completions. I think that speaks to a higher possession orientation, which you can probably see with your eyes as well. I mean, there's a lot less verticality to it. It was just Ten Hag getting himself in all kinds of muddles with that one. So.
I'm a little worried about the data aspect so far, but I'm not probably paying as much attention to it as I normally would. We're not scoring early, which is changing game state, which influences XG and how we perceive it. I think at the moment he's someone else asked a question about this, and again, I don't want to piss all over that one, but I think the game state and the way that we're running out games really well, but starting games really poorly, but we're also chasing games. So at the moment, I'm holding on that one. It was a really good question, but I feel like it's almost dirty data at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very small sample size, 21 games, I think it is.
With a lot of context, like the rotation of lineups, the games, we've had games every 3 days in 2 patches that he's had to deal with so far, about 7 games in a 3-week patch. It's been, I don't know, I just don't feel comfortable with the sample size quite yet.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Sushant says, isn't it very clear that Amorim wants to keep it tight for the first 45 to 60 minutes, then go for the win? I mean, is it? I don't know if it's clear. I don't actually disagree with the premise of the question. I just don't know that it's obvious to me that that's exactly what is happening, like as in the intention. We're extremely poor in the first 45 minutes against Leicester. Was it the plan for it to be extremely slow build up and not managing to complete any of our attacks? I don't think so. I just think they were rubbish and he changed it around.
I think the premise is a little bit different. I know they brought in that famed running coach. I think he's trying to change the manner in which they attack games with more intensity.
Yeah.
But they're only doing that in phases at the moment, particularly at the end of games, running out games really well. I don't think they've got that. It's no question that they haven't figured out how to start games with intensity.
Yeah.
Without, I think under Ten Hag they would do that, not get the goal for their hard work and then concede. Whereas this, they're holding quite firm at the back, but they're not figuring out how to bring their frontal press and create chances via turnovers. I'm just not seeing that at all early in games. Seeing that more in the last half hour, second half. We're starting second halves. Not too bad, particularly at the start of his tenure. I think the premise of the question is right. I would say that it's not clear, though, at the moment, whether that's the exact plan.
I think there's an interesting thing with Arne Slot's Liverpool where they have changed a few. Really clearly, you can see in the data where it's been changed, and they're going for short bursts of intensity, and it's not like heavy metal all of the time.
It's a physically safer. It's like how teams in ice hockey attack when a player's off the pitch. It's short burst.
Yeah,
not the perfect metaphor. But yeah, that's how I see it. I think that's a good point on Slot.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see with Amorim where it gets to, and especially after the summer when presumably we'll do some business of some kind.
With a couple of athletes, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll be going for younger, athletic. I mean, it's basically partly finances.
Dorgu's difference was stark, just him in open space.
Yeah.
Whereas we just haven't seen that.
Yeah, true. Yeah, compared to Mazraoui, lovely footballer, not an athlete. Me, as a 40-something-year-old man, would not be able to run around a football pitch for 90 minutes. But
I haven't hit top speed in like 3 years.
It's all relative. Yeah. All right. Grimoire85 says, can you think of any manager in the Premier League that has had such a bad start as Amorim and it turned out to be successful? Yeah. I can't actually, because I mean, if you think about it, over a longer period, Arteta had a couple of very bad, what were they, 8th and 8th, something like that in the first 2 seasons under Arteta. They were starting from a pretty crap base, clearly, been bad for a very long time, but this bad, I don't think so. I mean, Amorim's data is worse than Ten Hag's at this moment, quite a lot worse. It's just we're hoping that there's a higher ceiling down the line somewhere, right?
I feel like this is unprecedented for a club of this size to be struggling to this extent. So you sort of have to throw precedents out the window. Arteta is the best example of sticking with someone and believing in their ideas without the trophy payoff, with the obvious consideration to Manchester City's asterisk-laden dominance. They're also in an era with Liverpool and City. I mean, think about what Liverpool, fortunately, hasn't won because of what's happened with City. I think you have to judge it like Arteta within context. Can we go back as far as Sir Alex to highlight what his start at the club was like in the Palace FA Cup game where he was on the brink of the sack and everything changed that day? Let's not compare Sir Alex to Amorim. I'm just saying I'm actually saying there aren't a lot of historical precedents for this.
Yeah.
Because I don't think a club of this size has ever had a decade so bad in a financial fair play PSR era where it's going to take a long time to correct. Because they can't just go out. So Jim can't inject a certain amount of money, just buy their way out of it, sort of the way Chelsea did with their loophole spending. Those possibilities aren't available. So I think the precedence just isn't there.
Yeah, I mean, Sir Alex I kind of discount because United hadn't won the league in 20 years or something before he arrived and hadn't even got close to it. He finished, I can't remember what it was. Was it 6th, then 2nd, then 13th? And that second was, a bit of a freak. I think if you look at the longer picture, I mean, he had an 11th. Anyway, it was not good for many seasons. Martin Edwards, of course, has denied that he was on the brink of the sack, but there was unrest in the stands and so on and so on and so on. Hadn't been anywhere close under any of the other. I mean, Atkinson, couple of cups, nowhere near the league. Dave Sexton, everyone hated him, and then you're back into the O'Farrell, Wilf McGuinness, Sir Matt on and off, like before you have any success, right? So, all right. Jonathan says, we don't talk enough about midfield. Clear to me that the lack of goals and jittery defending are linked to midfield. Really think it's more than anything about the front two in front of the back three. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of focus on the wing backs, of course, because of the unusual nature of them, and on the inside forwards, because he's asked them to play in a slightly different role and sort of wide and cutting in, as Ten Hag did. I mean, what do you think about like what the balance of that should be? Because we bought Ogate for a lot of money, and he's brilliant at one thing, right? You know, interceptions, blocks, tackles, eating up ground. Not really brilliant at anything else, which means it really matters the kind of profile you have next to him, I think.
Well, we've seen, you and I discussed the issues between Mainu and Ugarte and them not quite blending together and the gaps it's leaving behind them. And that's been well documented by some people smarter than I. On X at the moment, they've highlighted when Ugarte presses forward, his partner has to automatically understand. And Casemiro is actually quite good at this, of dropping into that space behind them to when, if he fails to win the ball back, to have that ground covered and what that can allow other teams to do on the counter, particularly if you've got Harry Maguire to run past in the middle. It does ask a lot. So yeah. I think we know that there's midfield problems. The fact Bruno Fernandes is having to constantly play central midfield, particularly probably since the start of January. No, obviously, under Amorim. But, Toby Collier, Manuel Ugarte, they fill a certain role in certain games. I think when United are playing against a low block at home, they have to have a better central midfield pairing to, well, you don't really necessarily want Ugarte for those sorts of games. I would say I think he's better suited to teams that tend to attack more, break up the final third, winning the ball in the final third. But yeah, I'm not sure what you think, but I think we've always sort of known that there's been a midfield problem. It's been a problem since Michael Carrickcliffe. We've always talked about it. It's been like the great ignored problem. We've thrown things at, I think it would have been the summer of Sancho and Varane, where we went for shiny toys as opposed to really needing a central defensive midfielder. And it's what we're missing in that team, finish second. So,
yeah, I do worry though, because of the profile with Ugarte, and I don't hate him. I think he does some brilliant things, and especially in those big games, he's absolutely magnificent in some of them. Yeah, Arsenal, Liverpool, so on. But given that he's not he's ball carrier ish. He's not a ball progressor really through passing, and as you say, Amorim called out Kobbie Mainoo, saying he had a few problems defensively without really setting the wider context. It's kind of saying he's crap defensively. I don't think that's what he meant, actually. I mean, certainly if you look at the number of interceptions, blocks, tackles and stuff that Kobbie Mainoo puts in, it's plenty. I do worry about his future in the team, though, because Amorim just kept moving him further forward, which may be a better space for him. I do still think a number 8 is his number 8 in a 3-man midfield, as you would get in many teams, just not at United, would suit him really well. And he's going to have to adapt, otherwise he will end up out of the team. And you'll have a really talented young player getting binned off, and people get frustrated with him without really putting the 2 and 2 together and kind of working out what's really going on there.
I haven't been too sure how seriously to take that. The threat of him. I don't know. Someone said actually this morning that they worried that Amorim doesn't rate him. I don't think that's the case. I think he probably thinks that, based on what he said, I sort of interpret that as he doesn't think he can do the lung busting runs to get back and then also contribute. I think it's a both ways contribution issue. He can do too much of one, not enough of the other. I don't think he's a permanent 10. I think there's scenarios in which his work in tight spaces can really work. I just don't think he can do everything needed of an 8 in the 2-man midfield. I think that Bruno Fernandes can, because he has the endurance to get back and do the work defensively, and he just seems to fit better with Ugarte.
Yeah, it'd be good to look at the data on this at some point later, because again, it's like 4 or 5 games or something.
Yeah.
Whether United's chance creation drops off a cliff as a result, or whether Amorim can get, I mean, as we're not seeing yet, the patterns into United's attacking, like those repeatable ones. And there's another question coming up, but if you look at the Sporting side, the amount of overloads in wide areas, cut back, third man run goal they scored is a lot, right? In that it's very systemic. If you're building chance creation into the team pattern, great. United have relied on Bruno Fernandes for years, like for 50% of their chances created. And you play him deeper and he doesn't do that anymore, then you got a problem. Like a really big one. So
Yeah, I just don't think it's anything definitive. I would say with Mainu and anything, we're still falling out, but there are reasons to worry.
Yeah. All right. A couple of financial ones to move on to. Lots on the team there. A lot of
stuff.
We're not quite sure yet, I think, with the team. Yeah.
It's hard when there's so many questions.
Jonathan, again, says, very interesting financial stuff, specifically Trawler's pathway to full ownership, and so on, so on, so on. I mean, the pathway's written in the sales document. You just have to read it. Obviously, your mate Brent was rubbishing that the other day on the socials. And I don't know why I mentioned that. It's no point giving any credence to that.
I thought Muppeteers did a great job of congratulations on Brent for getting in the hot tub with his wife and then spending the whole time on his phone. But I thought him rubbishing that was really weird. I thought what Muppeteers did, educating people, was the whole point. I think it's probably the biggest issue that people have is misconceptions with the takeover.
Yeah.
And what it means. Like, I've got people saying in my mentions, I'm not even convinced INEOS are going to buy the club because they're not putting more money in. Well, they have. They're putting the maximum that they're allowed to put in.
They put way more than the maximum. It's only 105 million will go towards PSR, but
they've done more than the Glazers have done in 2 decades. It's somehow INEOS are worse. INEOS aren't doing a perfect job. Let's not get it twisted. The penny pinching is really hard to take, but they're making decisions that are really hard because, unfortunately, they're very apt business people. We aren't, and we don't. Well, not all of us are, and I'm not sure what you think, but I think the path to ownership is very clear. It's coming up. It's written into the document. If you read the SEC filings, it is very easy to understand what is going on. All you have to do, and if you haven't, is very apparent in how you respond.
Yes, I mean, the way I read the sales document and the SEC, the closing document after that, I mean, they're 2 lengthy documents, but they're out there in the public domain, was that the full sale is coming, and it was disagreement about the timing of it. Right. So if you look back to what he attempted to do first, Ratcliffe, that is, he attempted to buy all the Glazers shares and have a pathway to completing 100% of the share purchase over time, a 3 to 5 year time period. That was rejected, and he just tried different structures for what would be accepted. Now, there was some conjecture around that. Was it other shareholders who have a legal right to all be treated the same, even though there are 2 different classes of shares here? That had threatened litigation if they didn't get the same price. That was an issue there. Maybe not. I mean, I think there are actually some pretty good precedents in the US for different classes of share being treated differently. I mean, literally, different voting rights, like just literally. Plus, like, one has an open market and the other does not. So anyway, it's a very long question, but I don't necessarily think that was an issue. But I do think the fact that it's the right of first refusal comes with the price at $33, like being the set price at which Ratcliffe purchases. Now, of course, like the only scenario that is not true is if a other party comes along and offers more than Sir Jim is willing to offer after the 18-month window closes, 5 months' time, 4 months' time, offer more than Sir Jim is willing to go up to, and he already paid a massive premium, way more than the market.
Nobody seems to acknowledge that.
Not at all.
It's always ignored.
I mean, he paid $8 a share more than the next best offer, right?
Yeah, people probably think that just means $8.
Yeah. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds, yeah? So the only scenario in which it doesn't happen, I think, otherwise I wouldn't have written a document like this, so just done it as a simple transaction, is if another party comes along and offers way more. But it just seems extremely unlikely. Of course, the Glazers could just decide not to sell, right? And that's the other thing. Sorry, I'll let you come in a second. The one that drives me absolutely fucking bonkers, where I see people kind of somehow blame Sir Jim Ratcliffe for the Glazers not selling all of the shares. Like, he could have whipped out a gun and put it to their head and say,
Yeah, he wanted to keep them. He just wanted to keep them. He only wanted to buy 29.5% of the shares. Apparently, he thought, "Oh, no, they can stay. I'll just be another Glazer." Apparently, that's the whole rationale. It makes no sense. INEOS, I think we're calling them now.
Yeah, if the Glazers wanted to sell the whole thing, it looks like they could have just tried to negotiate the Qataris up. They didn't. In fact, they rejected a sale of all their shares because, like, why would they give a fuck about the open market stuff? And they rejected that. That was the first offer. Anyway, it's almost impossible. I mean, of course, listeners to this particular podcast probably get most of this stuff anyway because they've heard us talking about it. Me talking about it for months, years, or whatever. It's very hard to do financial literacy out into the world.
I'm going to clip this up because I just get sick of it. Yeah, to me, the stupid part of it, the thing that's always frustrated me, is that the Glazers did not want a full sale. They kept rejecting all the offers. So INEOS, Sir Jim, whatever you want to call them, they came up with a deal that paid at a premium, $8 a share, as you said, that got their foot in the door, gave them a lead-in to buy the club at full sale eventually. Is that not better than no sale?
Yeah.
But people want shiny toys. People wanted the allure of Qatar without failing to acknowledge that Qatar did not provide proof of funds on 3 occasions. You can, if you read through everything and not pay attention just to the spiels that people say, is that Qatar was effectively a ruse. And we know that now. The path to a full sale now is real. We just have to see the course. And it's really frustrating in the meantime.
Yeah. Steve, with an 8 rather than an E. It says, how many Windows cycles will it take to get past this skint situation? I mean, it's a little bit of a hard one to give you a really clear answer on that because it depends on our revenue base as well, right? So the cost side of things a little easier to control. That's why you see all the cuts. They will cut their cloth, no pun intended, in the transfer market accordingly to what we can afford, basically. United were very, 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 very close to failing PSR last time out. I think we can clearly say that. The fact that they came up with, I think, honestly, a ridiculous number on COVID impairments, like 2 years after COVID any restrictions were lifted, seems to tell you. I mean, the Premier League accepted it, not complaining, and I'm sure people at United would say, well, we had to cancel a tour, it had ongoing sponsorship impacts, and so on and so on. It's a really big number. So it must have been really, really close. There's a 3-year cycle, rolling 3-year cycle on PSR, which means you just need to, basically, the quicker United can get off high earners and high cost to bring in players out off the books, for at least a break-even number, a £100 million player amortized over 5 years is £20 million in terms of their costs per year plus the wages. Let's say they earn 10 million in wages, at £30 million a year is their costs. If you then, after 2 years, sell that player for 50 million, you made a £10 million PSR loss, right? Which is why I was saying on the last time we were together, if they sold Højlund in the summer, they probably make a loss, which means they won't sell him. It's just really difficult. It's part of the problem with Casemiro as well as his wages. So I haven't got a timeline, but basically the quicker they can get some of these players off the books. And Marcus Rashford does sort of benefit. I mean, obviously he has a 0 book value. So if he is sold to Villa, obviously the large wages are off the books, assuming we don't have to permanently subsidise that one. We'll see. And all the fee comes onto the books as well at the same time.
To me, I think the thing fans probably don't quite understand, because they just think of the total revenue, is that since COVID, the club has failed to bring in cash.
Yeah.
They've really struggled to generate and bring in cash, which means the actual cash reserves are really low. So the cash on hand that they have is as low as it's ever been. So until they can start becoming a self-sustaining football club with, academy sales, as hard as they are to deal with, that is what sustains you.
Yeah.
Buying players. If Dolgry doesn't work out in 2.5 years, it's about is he successful enough because you've profiled him right that you can still sell him at a profit to the club, and that's what adds to your book. So until the club starts doing that, like it's like your Dan James sorts of deals. Until the club starts doing that, United won't get out of it, plain and simple.
Yeah, yes, and absolutely. Champions League qualification via the back door with the Europa League would make a massive difference. It'd accelerate this timeline a year.
Yeah, at least. If you see what the teams are making in revenue now, it's nearly almost a 9-figure difference.
Yeah, you're pretty much guaranteed 40 million, and being in the group stage and 100.
You add in the match day revenue, all of that, the higher league positions, the money you get from finishing higher in the league, all of that. It's not even bearable.
Yes, and it's funny. We're in the interesting situation where if we were one of the historically smaller clubs that had a wealthy owner, we might look a bit like them at the moment. We'd love to chuck money into this, but PSR is stopping us. And by the way, we're looking at these European competitions and going, that's kind of a bit of an unfair advantage. Actually, it'll be interesting to see whether we come down the squad costs rule in the Premier League, because the initial proposal was that it would start at 85% of your revenues could be spent on squad cost, or only 70% if you're in the European places. Now, that needs some additional subtlety, because the difference between being in the Conference League and being in the Champions League is massive. I mean, the Conference League provides almost no money, and it would be totally unfair that clubs who are in the Conference League get treated the same way and they have a lower squad cost as a result. And the reason why that proposal came into play was so you don't get this situation where not only are you getting more money out of the Premier League for finishing in higher places, but then once you're in European places, you've got so much more money, it's almost impossible for everyone to catch up. And so you get these three blocks. You get the top, the middle, and the bottom. And it's kind of baked in at that point. Of course, if United were successful in the Champions League all the time, we'd be going, yeah, too right. It's good. And the other thing,
PSR is working.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's interesting is, of course, like, so Jim personally has a lot of cash. I mean, he's got 14 billion or whatever. That number is based on a theoretical valuation of INEOS, which is not publicly traded. Most of it is not. There's a holding company that is, but this is a company that has 60 billion euros a year in revenue, and he's got like a 60% share in it. So I think that.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how small United is in the grand scheme.
100x, more than 100x the revenues in INEOS. And so Jim, when you're thinking about legacy, once he's got control of this thing, like 50 shares plus 50% plus one share, as a minimum, he can then pay down the debt. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I think he'd probably see it as a useful tax hedge, to be honest. But the really, really important thing is the cash flow. Right now, like, he can't put any more in PSR terms, but the reason why we keep borrowing extra money and paid £40 million in interest last year was not because of the senior secured notes. That was about 20. The 40 was the revolving credit facility, which we stacked up because Eric Ten Hag wanted a bunch of players. Like, that cash flow, not doing that would have saved United £40 million last season.
I think the other thing, and INEOS might come into play with this, with third-party sponsorship, is commercial revenue. The club has really struggled on the commercial front post-COVID. They just haven't had the same growth. I mean, you look at the report, it's what's it called? The Money League?
Deloitte Money League,
at the moment. Yeah, the Deloitte Money League. That outlined how much we've struggled in commercial growth, again, post-COVID. Said this in the last one, so I won't go over the top of it, but those are the things we have to start regenerating.
Yeah.
And that'll help so much.
It'd been flat for a while. Actually, prior to COVID, it hadn't been growing, not in any meaningful sense. Like,
look at the causes of the Adidas deal that are getting enforced now, to show you the regression and the potential further regression in commercial growth. So that's something they've got to get moving.
They have, yes. I mean, it's interesting that at one of the Premier League meetings, United voted with City on associated party transactions. I mean, which is what INEOS Stadium at Old Trafford Park, would be very interesting, wouldn't it? All right, awful on. All right, there's some nostalgic questions here. Let's take a few of these before we wrap up. Mike Davies says, if you could add an ex-United player to the team, which one would be most effective?
I think it'd have to be a midfielder. So I might go prime Paul Scholes. I think the attacking in Peter Sick could give us actually push back as a number 8 would be really interesting. Otherwise, Roy Keane, one of the two, maybe 90s Roy Keane, the version we got pre-injury.
Yeah.
The way he could cover ground.
Yeah.
I think people forget that, like, he ended his career. People don't forget, like United fans know, but the way he could cover ground as an actual 8.
Yeah.
He was a box crusher. He wasn't just like a destroyer.
No, not at all.
So much more than that. He was such a fantastic player.
Brilliant passer as well.
Yeah.
Which is not long range, but just the crispness and accuracy of his passing. Yeah, my instinct was Roy Keane straight away. I mean, obviously we could do it with a striker, so just pick one. Van Nistelrooy, York, Cole, Rooney, they'd all get in this team. I mean, like, I let you go much further. Every single
Rooney's a great one.
Rooney's a good one, multifunctional. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, the funny thing about Keane, when I think about Keane, is he would have fitted really well in this era where we talk about progressive passing, because he always passed forward.
Yeah.
He would always yell at players who didn't pass forwards. It's something I always remembered about him, and it was something he talked about in his book. Anyway.
All right. Giant Ian says, I don't know if he's giant, but he claims he's giant. So Giant Ian says, it seems pretty clear this season would be going better at Erik ten Hag not being sacked. Even in the long term, we might be better place under Amorim. So the real question, was any post-Fergie manager sacked too soon? Would keeping one have subsequently meant achieving more than bringing in their replacement? Whoosh. Well,
you go first, please.
Well, I'm not considering Moyes because, the poor fella wet himself as soon as he came in the door. Van Gaal, I mean, it wasn't going well, but the interesting thing with, I mean, obviously, finishing fifth, and that was when United had standards, as the terminology is these days, and we're like, oof, that's too far down the list. That is not Van Gaal's career. Right? That's not the kind of football that he played over his career. So it feels like there was some very poor purchases. Don't know if they were his idea, but Morgan Schneidling, Depay, a whole bunch of others that just weren't any good, basically, on not the right level. So maybe he'd lost his edge, though, because he was obviously older. He'd come off that World Cup with Holland where they'd played 5 at the back, and that was not a Van Gaal thing at all, but done really well playing quite a conservative brand of football. So Mourinho just got way too toxic. Ollie, and we played our best football post-Fergie under Ollie, no doubt. Like, no doubt at all. And, it's quite reductive and narrow of me to say it was Ronaldo's fault, but I'm going to say that anyway. So
it was certainly like the marker of it.
Yeah.
It's what you can point to as like a turning point.
Do you think, would you have kept any of them on? Like, in the moment, at the time, I mean, even Ollie, I was like, I got to the point where, as much as I'm like nostalgic for him, I was like, it's just so bad, right?
I think the way we played under Ole was by far the best football that we played, because it was something, even amidst struggles, it was something for us to attach ourselves to, our ideals as Manchester United fans. I would say above all else, you'd like to see, that's one where you can wonder where would that have gone with a little more patience. Moyes, no. Van Gaal, no. Mourinho, as you said, got so toxic. Probably the one thing I wonder about is, if you see out that bad period, does it trend back up? That horrific third season that you always seem to have, when he seemed to have lost that edge that he initially had in his first few stops up until Real Madrid. Yeah, but I think for the most part, the way I've always seen it is all managers have been bound to fail because they didn't have a footballing structure designed to help them succeed.
Yeah.
So it's the same with the players. The players are in an environment that is fundamentally supposed to help them fail, not succeed. Bruno Fernandes succeeds in spite of that environment. Marcus Rashford succeeded at his best in spite of that environment. So you wonder more, with the right support, how would they have gone? But they were all bound to fail anyway. And I don't miss Ten Hag at all. I think it's probably I point in the other direction and say, what happens if we sack him in the summer? Have a clean break? Are we further along with a new coach and a full preseason? And the transfer target's more pointed in that manager's direction.
Keenan Daniels says, who of United's post-Fergie managers would be compared to United's pre-Fergie managers?
This one's for you before my time.
Oh, you'd say I'm old. Well, let me go back to 1909 when I was just a whippersnapper. Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of direct analogies. I mean, I first started watching United under Atkinson, and I'm not sure he really relates to any post-Fergie United manager at all. I mean, they did, this was not, obviously he wasn't as brilliant as Ferguson. Also, United didn't have money like Ferguson would eventually get later. I mean, in fact, actually, it was interesting going through the Lost Tapes episode that we put out on Michael Knighton, and of course that big spending spree that went on that summer on the basis that Knighton was going to provide funding for that. He didn't, obviously, and they spent a lot of money. I mean, Pallister was £2 million. It was British record fee and so on. So
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Atkinson spent money on Robson. That was his big purchase from West Brom. But anyway, the question was about, could I relate to any of... I mean, I don't know. I mean, Dave Sexton, before my time, really, but he was criticised for playing dour football, negative dour football. He's the Mourinho. He didn't have the personality or charm, though, of that. I mean, obviously, you've got O'Farrell as the Moyes character, right? Post-Busby failing as a result. The club's just so different. Pre-Fergie and post-Fergie.
That's exactly how I thought about it. BF, AF, before Fergie, after Fergie. Yeah. The way he transformed the club in both its image and, restoring what it stood for after the Busby Babes and what was lost in the doom and gloom of the 80s.
Yeah.
And things like that. It's just, it's not even comparable. The only thing that remained was the stadium, it's just, such a long period, I guess.
Knighton tried to buy it for 20 million in 1989. In 1998, when Rupert Murdoch and Sky tried to buy it, it was 700 million or something, 600 million, something like that. And that was in a decade.
It's funny to think with the way the Murdochs have been perceived as an Australian and watching the Murdochs now. Imagine if the Murdochs ever took control of United, and imagine how people perceive Sir Jim now to how they perceive Murdochs on a completely another level of evil for anyone who's watched Succession.
Yeah, well, although you do, of course, get the two Murdoch spawn of the devil hating each other. So there's always that. It's quite entertaining. Sushant says, if Ten Hag set the club back 5 years, how many did Mourinho? It doesn't quite scan that one. Mourinho. Yeah, I don't know that he did really. I mean, because I think the thing with Van Gaal in particular, like Moyes inherited an old squad, ruined them, but Van Gaal dismantled it. And he dismantled it with some very poor purchases. So I think he was more damaging than Mourinho. The players that Mourinho brought in were Pogba, Mkhitaryan, and Ibrahimovic. Yeah, I mean, not too many of them were super damaging. Obviously, Pogba, not awesome in the
more
fullness
off the field.
Yeah, it was the stuff off the field that people hated. Yeah, and he didn't fulfill everything we wanted on the field. I don't think it set the club back.
It's more the damage Ten Hag's done off the field because of the amount of like I said this earlier in the pod. It's in a PSR world, you can't make £600 million worth of mistakes. It's just that's what sets it back. There's so many additional factors. Like if Van Gaal had done that in the same club scenario, then it's different. Like especially the way he sold players, the way he binned off to Chicharito, Johnny Evans, things like that for absolutely next to nothing. When the club was such a poor, like even worse than we are today at selling players, that was more damaging.
Oh God, so many of them.
It's Mourinho's relationship with the media and how things got so toxic. His fallout with players. I mean, Luke Shaw, his fallout with Luke Shaw and things like that. That was more damaging from a playing group perspective than a financial one.
Yeah, but it was fixed in 12 games after Mourinho had gone when Ollie won them all, basically. So
Yeah.
Come Up With Shit says, what United player, past or present, do you dislike the most?
Well, I didn't even think about this one. Anthony is the obvious one in the current time for me. I can't, obviously, all the accusations can't stand him. Mason Greenwood goes without saying. I've been long outspoken. I don't have a heap. For some reason, I had a rational dislike of Roy Carroll and Barthez. I hated Barthez. Like when we played France in a friendly, Australia did at the MCG, and I remember just yelling at Barthez from the stands as a kid. Because I didn't understand what a goalkeeper was doing with the ball with his feet back then.
Yeah.
I don't think I had too many. I hated when we signed Laurent Blanc.
Well, we'd let Stam go and then brought in like 97-year-old Laurent Blanc. Yeah. It turns out he was a wrong un, so you had good instincts there.
Yeah, I don't know what you think.
Anthony and Greenwood are two wrong uns. At least one of them definitely is. The other, it's hard to read that Brazilian article without concluding the same thing. The one I find it really hard to get over is like Ronaldo, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Like one, he was just magnificent for United in his first spell, just so good, and we didn't know what he was getting up to, right? And you cannot read that deposition and have a very different opinion of him. You just can't.
I've tried to explain this to people, but they just don't want to see it.
They don't.
You read it, you can't unread it.
You can't unread it. You'd have to believe that a German newspaper faked a document, a reputable one, and Ronaldo said he would sue, never did. And there's no reason for it, since he's quite willing to be litigious. So, I just like, yeah, that one's really hard. And it's also his incredible arrogance to go, which I loved in his first spell, of course, because he was our kind of arrogant.
Well, when you can back it up, it's different. And again, we didn't know what we knew when he jetted off for Real Madrid. It was a bit different. I mean, the last season was tough when you knew he wanted to go, but had agreed to stay. And I found that like confusing when you love someone so much, but you know they've got no interest in really being around. They've just got their heart set on something else. That's tough. But when he came back, I mean, we had the moments with all the goals and stuff, but that was always really internally confusing for me.
When Luis Figo,
that's when I read the Der Spiegel stuff, because I was off social media for 4 years, and and that's when I was turned on to it. So I've had people criticize me. I thought, well, I didn't know then what I know now. Yeah, you just can't.
I was just thinking. I mean, it's that thing when Luis Figo moved to Real Madrid from Barcelona and came back. You remember that first game? He came back to the Camp Nou and they threw a pig's head, but there was also a banner there saying, "We hate you so much now because we loved you so much." There's some of that. Like there's a disappointment in a hero turning out to be a wrong un.
I've got one. Gabriel Hines. I loved him because I was a left footer and I played similar positions to him. I hated when he went to Liverpool. As someone who didn't understand enough about it back then, I was just so confused and I hated him for that.
He'd been pushing that for years, apparently. All right. Jack Dowling. We'll round off with a couple of silly ones, as is the tradition. What is there more of in the world, wheels or doors? This is like 3 years out of date, Jack. And this was going around during COVID times.
What did you say?
What is there more of in the world, wheels or doors?
Wheels, surely. No, doors. Doors. I'm going doors.
I mean, there's... if I was answering this question, if it was like a Google interview question, you know, how they like to throw one of those, I would have a very different answer than just picking one. I would build myself a framework of like, so I can size each industry and then do it from there.
Well, anyway. I've got 12 wheels in my house right now, and I think that's more than I have doors. So I don't know. You've confused me.
I mean, I've got a whole bunch of suitcases. Some of them have 8 wheels on them.
Oh, yeah. Fuck. I didn't even think of that. No.
There you go.
I'm just going to bow out of this one. This is exposed. This one's exposed me.
It's real. Liam Dunny says, Am I still a friend of the pod? Paul says yes, but I feel I need confirmation again to keep it in my bio. That's fine. You're always a friend of the pod. Friend of the pod status remains forever until you're proven to be a wrong un. Is that fair?
Yeah, if you're a dick on social media, then
we may revoke it. Yeah. We'll pull out the contract and say
easy to get, hard to lose. Or is it hard to get, easy to lose? I don't know.
All right, last question. We'll leave it here. Chris Etchingham, one resident Scouser, also friend of the pod.
Maybe it is easy to get then.
Yeah, he's always. I don't know why he listens. He does. I think. Well, I know why he listens now, because he enjoys it, because he's gloating in good times.
Oh, hate listen.
He hate listens.
I can't do that. I don't know how people do it. Good on you.
No,
good on you.
I'm not sure I could listen to a lot of Anfield rap.
No.
He says, has the article I wrote for you 10 years ago about United not going the same way as Liverpool in the 90s and noughties aged well? Yeah, he wrote this piece. You can't get to it anymore, but it's in the archive somewhere about how the United would not go through a period of Liverpoolization. I think it was based on the fact that we'd used that term on the pod or something like that. And I mean, of course, I felt like this. I felt like United were so rich, they couldn't possibly fail. Like the worst it could get would be like, third or fourth for a couple of seasons till we got the right man or whatever. I did not think, I did not bank on Ed Woodward. Like, because the thing with the Glazers is they would not allow Sir Alex to spend money, because we were spending 100 million a year on interest payments after the 2012 IPO, 2010 bond issue and 2012 IPO. Your club was in much better financial place versus the debt, as in we weren't hemorrhaging money out in interest payments. I mean, it kept growing. It was just used really badly. That's the thing.
It's astounding. What did you say the other day? We're up to 3 billion.
Yeah, I think it's over 3 billion. If you do net transfers plus wages, it's 3.2. If you add in, as Kieran Maguire pointed out on Twitter, you got to add another 400 million or so in management fees and dividends for the Glazers. Yeah, it's just incredible. Wow.
Yeah, money. I hate when they throw you spent so much money. It doesn't matter if you have no idea where you're going or where you're trying to head, except keep things where they were just trying to keep things where they were to keep the money rolling. It wasn't about ambition. It was about keeping things the same.
Absolutely. All right. On that very sad note, we will leave it there. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, viewers, wherever you are. Very long mailbag pods. Catch the lost tapes on your podcast app of choice. I enjoyed making it. Hope you enjoyed listening. And you can find Adam on socials. Adam Joseph ___ on Twitter. I'm NQAT Pod absolutely everywhere. Catch you next time. Bye now.